article the other day about what to do if you're presenting after lunch when everyone's energy is like that. So maybe halfway in between we'll stand up and do some jumping jacks or something to help us renew our energy for the afternoon. I'm CAMILLE Crittenden. I'm Executive Director of Citrus and the Bonato Institute, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. But I am very honored today to be joined by two distinguished colleagues, KENDRA Ard and VALERIE LUNDY-WAGNER. Unfortunately, Van Williams is unable to join us, so I will cover some of his slides, both representing UC, but I also invite anyone else who is from UC, especially from CIO or CISO type positions, to jump in if questions come up that you may be better positioned to answer than I am. So our panel today is on narrowing the digital divide, how to build on higher education broadband. And one of the reasons that I was interested in convening a panel like this and sharing the discussion with the people here at CENIC is that some colleagues and I led a working group this past year called Building on UC Broadband. So the idea was that we wanted to consider what role UC, this vast infrastructure of the 10 campuses and 5 health systems and multiple field stations of the agricultural and natural resources system. This is a huge infrastructure. How could we better serve the communities where we operate, not only our students, staff, and faculty, but also their families and their communities? Is there a way that we can expand on the infrastructure that we have some control over in order to improve broadband access and thus narrow the digital divide in California? Why now? I think this is always a good question. And we heard this morning a little bit about some of the state and federal funding opportunities. I think that's one answer to the question, why now? There's funding available to do some of these things that might not have otherwise been available. And it's always a good time to think about digital equity, so why not? So I'll tell you a little bit, just to give you a hint of how the panel's going to go. I'll tell you a little bit about this project. I won't speak for too long about it. And then I'm going to present some of Van's slides. There's a lot of demographic information about UC, maybe just to get your head thinking about what UC could contribute. And if you have questions of us, please do think about it. Then I'll turn it over to KENDRA to talk about the CSU system, and then to VALERIE to talk about the community colleges. So I think among the folks here on stage, and doubtless within the room, that we have pretty good coverage about what institutions of public higher education in California might be able to do. So within this project that I was talking about, building on UC broadband, we really came up with these 4 guiding strategies and ultimate recommendations for what we could do. One is to enhance infrastructure and streamline policies, and we were just talking about how these big distributed organizations that we help to lead, it's often difficult to kind of weave your way through the policy requirements of the people that we work for and the state and other kinds of policies that are required. So this would be one recommendation, not surprising perhaps. Strengthen services and programs that are enabled by broadband, and I'll get into some details on all of these, this is just a preview. Establish communications and outreach campaigns to really draw on that part of the UC infrastructure as well, the people who are there to help us get the word out about programs like the Affordable Connectivity Program and other kinds of subsidies. And then finally, to increase the partnerships with the public and private sector. So I would say partnerships among our organizations as well as with the industry partners that are also in the room. So with regard to infrastructure, and I can make these slides available, just to illustrate the wide reach of UC properties. You can see on the map here, this is already from a few years ago, but this is just the agricultural and natural resources facilities. You'll see that they cover all 58 counties of California. So we could be doing more, not only to improve services, honestly, to those offices themselves, but also to the communities that they serve. So we want to see where we are. We need to have better mapping. I think this is a theme that's come up in a variety of panels today and will probably throughout the conference, to have a better inventory of what do we have and how can we build on it. We want to create pilot programs, so we'd love to talk with people also in government relations kind of offices or public communications kind of offices to think about how we could take a small example and really demonstrate success and then build on it. And then to create system-wide guidance just to help reduce overhead for some of our partners within our own systems so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. In services and programs, thinking about ways that we can identify areas of collaboration, especially with our faculty members perhaps. So, many of our faculty members rely on strong broadband networks in order to do their work. We need their advocacy as well, and some of this, the governance structure that we all work within in higher ed, that the faculty members have a strong voice. And so if we can bring them on board to say why this is important and how it's going to actually benefit them, not only in their teaching, which the last couple of years has really demonstrated, but also in their research for those who require this kind of high bandwidth network. Look at possible research grant awards at UC. There are some that are offered through the Vice Chancellor for Research, and there are others available then farther down the line through NSF or USDA or other kinds of organizations that would be useful. And then develop relationships with our public agency partners as well. I think there are opportunities there where we can think with, say, Caltrans about how are we actually building out broadband through their infrastructure and how can that connect better to UC properties or other higher ed properties. I mentioned outreach and communication, so thinking about how we can make more information available, say through many campuses have basic needs offices where students can come and find out about subsidies for food or for housing. Broadband should be one of those. It's really an essential service. And I think that we could probably do a better job of working with those offices to make sure that they know about the subsidies that are available, not only to the students, but also to their families and communities. One idea that came out of it was to create even a student Connect California Corps. So you might have heard about Californians for All. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the program. Maybe it's on the slide. Yeah, Californians for All College Corps that was established in this past year through some funding from the state, where they really harnessed student interns to be able to go out and work in certain fields like in climate and education and health, where they would get a stipend at the end of their year, or they would get some funding toward tuition, but basic support for students who are doing this kind of internship work. What if we could create a similar kind of core of California UC students who might be able to do some of this work, to be a liaison to the communities and to build visibility for the opportunities that are available through broadband. And then finally, the partnerships. I think this conference is really important if you've been chatting with people over lunch or have a chance to meet at the reception, just to really explore what kind of partnerships are possible and would be beneficial for our organizations through partnerships between nonprofit organizations, higher ed and museums, higher ed and libraries, with the industry, the ISPs and other providers. Those are going to be really important to really strengthen the opportunities for our constituents, all of them, to be able to take better advantage of the broadband that's available. So that's really my recommendation. And of course, to actually make it happen, you need staff. And probably not the overworked staff that we're already tasking with a number of responsibilities, but we wanted with this report also to really encourage the executive leadership to think about what it will take to be successful, and that includes actually people who are going to be responsible for this as part of their job responsibilities. So here were our next steps to talk about it with you all, and I really welcome your feedback and offers of collaboration. We also want to talk with the state agencies like CDT and the California Broadband Council and others that are working on these issues. They were all part of the working group, representatives from those groups, as well as others through UC. The Caltrans had someone on there. My colleague Ramesh Rao, who's also here from UC San Diego, was on there. So we had a really nice multi-stakeholder working group working on it, but we needed to strengthen those partnerships. And explore other funding opportunities. So if you know of programs that this sounds like a great match for, please do let me know. So those were the recommendations that came out of this working group. And at this point, I would turn it over to Van, if you were here. But instead, I'm just going to run through his slides a little bit. It'll give you just some more context around UC. So thinking about the three pillars of the mission of the University of California, of course, it's research, education, and service, and broadband really touches on all three of those. We'll let you know a little bit more about UC, I'm sure. How many of you attended a UC? That's a pretty representative number. How many of you currently work for UC? Thank you. Good. Please chime in if you know something that I should be saying here. Okay, so UC started 150 years ago, as you probably know, and its mission really was to make college available for everyone. And I always have to put the caveat here, which Van didn't, but that they did admit women fairly early in UC's history, far earlier than Stanford or any of the East Coast schools, so I'm proud to say that. Today, UC has about 27,000 researchers. Here are some statistics about the student body. About a third of the undergrads are Pell Grant eligible, so that's an income qualifying subsidy for tuition and fees. About 40% of the students are the first in their families to go to college, and about 83% are Californians. If you hear a lot of the language around the legislature and elsewhere saying, well, we need more Californians in UC, it's really gone over to the international students and out-of-state students. Well, actually, still, 83% of the undergrads are from California. So as I mentioned, has 27,000 researchers, conducts $5 billion a year in research, so this is likely cumulative, but we are one of the, as a system, one of the highest receiving entities of NSF funding, of NIH funding, so a lot of the research that's sponsored at the federal level goes to UC and represents 10% of academic research in the US. I'm not sure how that percentage was arrived at, probably by the funding, but I would say also in research, publications, and productivity and output, it would be similar. UC Health is also an important part of the UC system. It serves 1.8 million patients annually, and so we've all understood in the last couple of years as well how important telehealth is, and the UC system has been really expanding that capacity as well in order to serve more Californians. So here's a little, infographic that illustrates what I was pointing out earlier, and that is research, teaching, public services are all the essential pillars of UC's mission, and they're held together by a broadband network that's really essential for all of them. So here are a few more statistics about, what did we learn from the, from the COVID period, and this takes a little bit of concentration to actually see, but you'll see that during COVID that adoption of broadband and digitization of customer interactions has really accelerated in North America as it has elsewhere. This slide gives you a little bit more detail about how that breaks down by demographic. And you'll see, as you might anticipate, that the households that are white, that are higher income, and that have higher education have more access both to internet and to devices at home. So Pew has done a lot of research on this. This might even be a Pew slide, I'm not sure. But that's a distinction that persists. I think those gaps are narrowing, but we still have work to do. And then again, just to emphasize that it's not just education or telehealth, but also remote work. Like UC employs thousands of people as employees, and so we also need to be sure that we're serving them and giving them the capacity that they need to do their jobs to fulfill UC's mission. So this is the same illustration that you saw before. Basically, we need access, awareness, actualization to come together to create broadband solutions for all of UC, and then to extend that beyond as far as we can in order to improve the state of California. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Kendra Ard, who will tell you about the California State University system. Once she concludes her remarks, and Valerie Hassan will really welcome your questions. We have microphones set up for questions as well. So thank you.
All right. So first, let me say thank you to CAMILLE for inviting the CSU to participate in this with you. It's a pleasure to be here. Kendra Ard from the California State University. And to get started, I will share with you a bit about the California State University. So we are the nation's largest four-year public higher ed institution, and we have 23 campuses across the state. We award almost half of the state's bachelor's degrees annually, 129,000. And to tell you a little bit about our student population, we have almost 500,000 students. And 9 out of 10 of those come straight from California's public high schools. Half of our students have Pell Grants, and a third are the first in their families to go to college. So when we talk about digital equity, looking at our student population, you can see how important it is for us to address that. When we look at digital equity, there's a lot of lenses to look through it, but we have 3 primary ways that we look through it. We look at devices, we look at connectivity, and then we look at digital literacy. So focusing in on the first one, a year ago, we launched an important initiative to provide devices to our students who did not have a reliable device for their education. The program was called C-Success, and the first year it had 14 campuses participating, where they provided device bundles to their first-time freshmen and transfer students who did not have a reliable device for their education. It was free for the duration of their educational journey with the CSU. So this was pretty unique and pretty monumental for those students. We did recently conduct an assessment of how this program impacted those students who participated. 91% of the students who received a device responded that having the device made them feel more prepared to be successful in their education. And 95% of them reported that it gave them more of a sense of belonging and feeling supported by their campus. And I think that's really important, because when you look at the sense of belonging, that's related to the connectivity. And the device was really the tool that helps them to be connected in this digital world that they have to exist in. The program is ongoing. It's expanding this year to include more campuses and more device options. And fortunately, the leader of that program is actually here in the room, so if you end up with questions about it, we'll be able to answer them. So looking beyond the device, obviously that's great, but you need the connectivity. And so as John talked about, as Camille, I think you talked about, the Affordable Connectivity Program is really important. We estimate that about 250,000 of the California State University students are eligible for the ACP, and so we have worked to promote that program to our students. We can promote it in ways like when we have touch points, when we hand out loaner devices or the C-Success devices, we can promote it that way. We also promote it when students come in to their campus IT shops looking for technical support. That's another touch point where we can share this program with them. And perhaps most importantly, like the UC, we have our basic needs offices at each of our campuses. And so they have taken obviously a very important and enlightened approach to basic needs, and they look at it not just dealing with food insecurity or housing insecurity, but they've also identified digital insecurity as an issue, and so they also try to direct our students to this program that can help them with that problem. Another way that we are looking to narrow the digital divide at the California State University is several of our CIOs participate in local or county broadband consortia. And so they are there participating and helping drive these initiatives, advocating for funding, helping the community understand the importance of the efforts, helping with expertise when there are grant writing activities, and really just trying to bring success to their efforts, knowing full well that the children in the community that ultimately get served by the broadband consortia will eventually be California State University students. And so we're just helping them early, which is a great thing to do. Taking a multi-layered approach is important to the CSU, and so another layer that we have is that each of our campuses has implemented EduRoam across the 23. EduRoam allows our students to access the wireless networks at any CSU campus, not just their home campus. And actually, because nearly every university in California has EduRoam, it's not just limited to the CSUs, but they can also access at the UCs and others. That became even more obvious how valuable it was during the pandemic, as many of our campuses were able to provide outdoor wireless and serve the community that was around them. And it's actually just a bit of a plug for the next presentation that will be here in this room. We will have a little bit of a discussion from some friends from Utah. If you see that bright red circle over Utah, that designates a density of eduroam access. And so that's another way that we're looking to learn what Utah has done and maybe see if we can do it here to advance access in California.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Valerie Lundy-WAGNER, Vice Chancellor for Digital Innovation and Infrastructure at the California Community Colleges System. You know, I'm happy to be here. I think people don't really necessarily understand the California community colleges and how complex we are. Not necessarily unique, but complex. What's important to me here, and I think I'll try to infuse throughout the presentation, is, you know, part of why we're here, I would imagine my colleagues here and even Van, who's not here from the UC, is, you know, the work that happens on college and university campuses is about helping people sort of get to where they want to go, right? And I think it's always important that we remind ourselves of that. Otherwise we can get lost in like the details of some of the technical stuff that lots of people don't really care about unless it's broken, right? So, you know, let me first tell you a little bit about the California community colleges. I put a number of sort of data points on here, but I've highlighted 3 that you'll see. You know, just like the CSU and the UC, the vast majority of our students are low income. People who are coming to the California community colleges are coming for a variety of reasons. They just finished high school. They never finished high school. They're coming to this country. They lost their job. They've been out of work. They had kids and need to get back into the workplace, right? Lots of these folks are low income, and understanding those circumstances that are bringing them to our campuses is critical. Noting that more than half of our students are 25 basically and over also means, I think when we, you know, make jokes about the Gen Zs and the millennials and the, you know, all of the different groups and how they access and understand technology, including issues surrounding broadband, it's important for us to be paying attention to like who that is. In fact, I think at least 1/3 of our population are folks who are 45 and above. So just like, please keep that in mind. It's not all people who are doing Snapchat and all that fun stuff. And then the last one that I've highlighted here is on housing insecurity. So when we think about what it means to have access to education, it's great when we're thinking about, you know, I went to UCLA, the lawns and the, you know, fields and, you know, just the dorms and all that good stuff. That is not necessarily the case for most of the students who are at our institutions. And as you can see on here, this is 1.8 million students since the pandemic. Previously, we were up to about 2.2 million students, right? So when we're thinking about what it means to have access, this is actually a multi-layered issue that is both on campus, the few of our colleges that have housing, but it's really like everywhere in the state, right? And then, of course, what's really important are the about 93,000 faculty and staff, right? They are there to support their students, and what that means is that they're supporting them both on campus, remotely, and I think I'll get to later sort of what that means, again, in the context of sort of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think for me, in my role, the commitment is to students, and so I like to share this with folks just to make sure like they're clear. I don't know that we're gonna sort of getting to digital equity as something we check off the box, but I do think that we need to have some aspirations. And the goal here is really that anyone, regardless of where they live, what they look like, which college they're closest to, what their circumstances are, that they are able to access post-secondary education and training on demand. No small feat, which is why you are all here. So thank you for being here with us. The California Community Colleges is really, I think in the last 5 to 7 years, been focused on trying to align resources and programs, and part of why I'm pleased to be up here with my colleagues from the UC and the CSU is to continue to deepen our partnership with them, but I think folks like you all who are here in the audience around what does it mean to actually do that? I think Kendra mentioned it, Camille mentioned it. This is, again, multiple layers of the type of programs and services that we do on our campuses, but then also how we interface with other state agencies, private institutions, corporate, et cetera. As I continue to try to prioritize the students, I bring this slide in here from one of my colleagues who focuses on financial aid and basic needs, just to remind us of these multiple layers. Students are coming to our colleges through things like the admissions and records you can see sort of over toward the left. They're coming to us for, because they have to use CalFresh, so for the county agencies on the right. They might be part of programs for low-income students in the top middle, EOPS and CARE. All of these programs to date, and really historically, have been disjointed. They all live separately. And so you can imagine signing up for different types of services and your enrollment in places where you do not have reliable connectivity, when you do not have reliable tools. And this is part of the problem. I think we are striving to make this less messy of a student reality, but I wanted to just put it up here because enrolling in college is not as simple as just, I think back when I did it, you called on the phone, but some people waited in lines, right? It's not just that. I think the California Community Colleges also has a really important program that's been piloted the last couple of years called the Zero Textbook Cost Program. This is fabulous for all of these students, so many of whom are low income. You could imagine being able to enroll in what is effectively the cheapest post-secondary education you can get in the country, having no burden associated with buying your textbooks is fabulous, but only if you have connectivity, right? And so these sort of things make this messy reality, this notion of broadband, what does it look like? It's really important for us. In terms of sort of these digital inequities that we know about, I think people are, I think at the Chancellor's Office, we provide a lot of guidance to our colleges and districts. We do not necessarily sort of direct them, but I think we learned very early on that, giving out Chromebooks is great, but not if students are in programs of study that require more bandwidth, right? That need to do interactive labs or things sort of like that. Cell phones and unlimited data are not enough, and I think even though it might have been on one of Van's slides, some of the disparities, it doesn't actually look like it's that big of a deal. I think we got to be really clear on what we mean by broadband access and what that affords a student to be able to do from their home. And then even a faculty or staff member who's trying to support them. We have to also remember about, I think we saw in the early days of the pandemic, all the people who are at home who are trying to do school and work at the same time, and it just it becomes a problem pretty quickly, especially for those of our students who are in these rural communities where it was already a little bit precarious, right? I think we see every sort of summer now and fall the issue associated with our fires, let alone any other sort of catastrophes that can be especially problematic. And then finally, folks who are needing services outside of your typical 9 to 5. What does that mean? How does that look? That's important. So I think, in a decentralized system, so we have these 116 colleges organized into 73 districts, and then my office in Sacramento, it's really important. What we've mostly been focusing on the last couple of years is having these circuit upgrades. And that, I think, is especially important. To some extent, I could imagine us thinking about the circuit upgrades most relevant to the CSU and the UC, given the volume with the research and the medical centers and the law and all of that. But I think, again, because of the way students in our system are dispersed, it becomes sort of very problematic when you don't have a resilient network that you're tapping into. And so, I think in terms of the other big thing for me is, I think, advocacy. How do I engage administrators, trustees, faculty? These are all really important decision makers on our local campuses on these 4 bullets, right? I don't think people necessarily know, and I'm not sure if the CSU and the UC, if you all decide at your central offices about being in person, but I think in our system, all 116 or all 73 districts decide who's doing what in person and what not in person. right? And that has implications on what kind of connectivity you have. Which technology tools are you using? What partnerships are you a part of? We don't necessarily control or keep that at the Chancellor's office, but I think my hope is, and part of being here is to understand from partners where we can sort of be piggybacking. And with that, I guess I'll go to these partnership opportunities, right? What does it mean to be continually assessing what we do have? How do I make sure that it is resilient? What kind of advocacy can we do together, particularly when you think about, I didn't have a map like the two of you did, but I think, you know, what you may have seen, at least from, I think, the CSU map, maybe the UC as well, is there is a part of California on the east, sort of from the center almost to the bottom of California, where there's not a lot of activity. There aren't a lot of institutions, and there are a lot of people there. Guess what? Why? Because the cost of living, right? It doesn't matter if it costs only $30 a unit to take courses in our system, if you can't live somewhere that has the infrastructure that is required, right, to be successful. So with that, I will stop there. I'm super excited to be here. Appreciate you all, and please appreciate your colleagues in the California Community College system.
Thank you, Valerie and Kendra, for your presentations. I think you really highlight some great points. Valerie, I especially liked your point that digital equity isn't just a yes-no question. Do you have a device? Do you not have a device? Do you have access to the internet? Do you not? But it's really what is the quality of that connection? How many other people in your house are doing things at the same time? What are the demands of your work? Is it streaming? Is it just email or whatever? Like, it's definitely a more nuanced picture than that, and that's something that we as professionals need to attend to and make sure that we're actually serving the students and their families as we need to. So we welcome your questions, comments. What are your thoughts? What opportunities did you see to contribute to the mission as you heard the comments from my colleagues and myself? If you wouldn't mind just saying who you are, maybe your organization, and then.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Linnea Jackson. I'm the general manager with the Hoopa Valley Tribes Public Utilities. And so I kind of wanted to comment, we don't have a UC in our area, but we do have Cal Poly Humboldt that locally just changed to address, you know, STEM activities. We also have a local JC, College of the Redwoods. We have a satellite office on the reservation. So my comment as we expand broadband capacity is to encourage you guys to reach out to tribes and work with them, because now we have the funding, the capabilities, the tribal staff that now we can be the providers as opposed to large telecoms. We're boots on the ground, we know the public, we're serving our own communities. So for instance, we're working with a local telecom to serve the library's transport back through our wireless backhauls. We're providing the internet service now to the College of the Redwood branch. And we need additional capacity, so we're in an area that's a Tier 2, Tier 3 fire threat district. We definitely need energy resiliency. We're impacted by that. So it's solar, backup generation, UPS is those things that we might not be covered in these funding opportunities. So I just kind of wanted to say that tribes now are going to be those partners as well. So I would encourage and do that, because we're the ones that are going to lead the charge in our own tribal rural areas. So I thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. That's really an important point, and would love to partner with you on that.
Hi, I'm George Heckman. I'm a native Californian living now in North Carolina, the son of a community college graduate who went on to become an electrical engineer. And on that note, the community colleges nationwide, let alone in California, are probably the biggest job training and skills training engine that there is in the country. I spent some time, for instance, working with a HVAC company, air conditioning company. There's this great need within the trades, for the community college training. So with that prelude, my question is, there's a big private sector need for the product that the community colleges turn out, and what are you doing in terms of public and private partnerships, to get these students some of the technology that they need? Is there any formal type of program for that?
Yes, there are. So as I mentioned, we're super decentralized. And so what that means is I usually end up setting up system-wide contracts which can be used as a vehicle for each of the individual colleges. Typically when there's a critical mass is when I sort of get pulled in or sort of triggered to support and execute and possibly subsidize those. I think otherwise, oftentimes, and again, I think this is more historically, we've seen colleges and districts do a lot of that work on their own. Certainly there are a number of like constituency groups that get together and meet and talk about those things. And so I would also, if I can, at least have two of my people that I see raise their hands. They might be able to also help you from community colleges. So I see them right here and this gentleman over here. They could also share, but I think my thinking is, I think that I've shared is, you know, we're going into a recession. It's important that we think about how we spend funds, the extent to which I can be pulled in for supporting system-wide contracts for tools and services and products is important to me right now, because I would rather us do a little bit of the logistical pain now than if when the state has to cut budgets. But you might be able to chime in.
I'm happy to, Valerie. My name is Rick Shaw. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Antelope Valley College, out at the western edge of the Mojave Desert. And I want to emphasize something that Valerie brought up. The community college system is exceptionally decentralized. 72 separate districts with a separate elected governing body. Some of those are multi-college districts, some of those are single college districts. We're a single college district. And in the Lancaster-Palmdale area, we are very aerospace centric. So Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, NASA, Edwards Air Force Base, you get the picture. So our CTE perspective is very focused towards that. About 5 years ago, the plant head at Northrop, recognizing they just got the contract for the new strategic bomber, the new B-21, came to our president and said, I need 600 airframe mechanics. Fortunately, we already had an airframe program, and we have one of the pilot bachelor's programs in the state that produces a bachelor's for that as well. We took portions of that program and developed an 8-course certificate. We've churned through 600 graduates in that program, not just for Northrop, but to Boeing, to BYD, to a whole collection of community needs. And that's one of the things that I want to emphasize is we partner with our community for what their CTE or educational needs are, and then focus our efforts outward that way. Every academic program on our campus has an advisory committee as part of our accreditation cycle. We bring in industry experts from those programs, and they guide us on what our programs should be doing to meet their needs. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I was just curious as to what your private sector partners are doing, for instance, to help provide things like equipment.
I can give you a couple of perfect examples. Okay. Northrop donated a boatload, several truckloads of equipment for our airframe program. NASA donated an F-18 for our airframe folks. We've also got 5 or 6 other aircraft out at the airfield off the north side of town, Fox Field. Our nursing program is heavily impacted. Getting into it is literally a lottery because of the incredible need for RNs and the demand to get into the program. But our local hospitals compete to get both our graduates, but to get our students and to do their practicum as well. So we're very heavily engaged with our community.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Those are really great points. I think all of us, it sounds like the community colleges are farther out in front perhaps than at least you see as far as really training students for what the workforce is going to require. And Citrus is running an internship for the first time this past year called the Workforce Innovation Program, where we're training students to go out into paid internships over the summer, also providing some workshops to help them with professional development, etiquette, you know, how to write a professional email, how to interact with your boss, how to ask questions if you don't know what what you need to do. Broadband is not yet one of them. We have had other areas like aviation and robotics and climate resilience and health and such, but we're looking at what we can do next year, and perhaps broadband would be a space where we could encourage students to do that across the 4 campuses that Citrus represents.
I just wanted to throw another data point in, along with collaboration between the systems. Bakersfield has a satellite on our campus. We partner with Long Beach with an engineering program that works intentionally to get their students internships in industry to help pay for the program. And we also partner directly with Northridge on several programs. So as a hub and a community, we all know each other. And we play off each other quite a well. By the way, go Northridge.
Thank you. I love those examples of collaboration across our higher ed institutions.
Hi, Kevin Miller, State Center Community College District. We're a multi-college district in the Fresno area, center of the state center. We have 4 colleges there. And, you know, we don't, the other folks have made comments about the decentralized nature of the community college system. It's true, we don't work with other districts as much as we probably should, but we do work with our communities very closely. So there's I don't know if there's any in the room today in this session, but about a year ago we started putting together the Fresno Coalition for Digital Inclusion, working on digital equity, infrastructure, working with the cities and the counties in our area. Quick plug for our website, connectfresno.org. You can check out the advocacy work that we're doing together with the K-12s, building private LTE networks, CBRS, those kinds of things. Trying to do it ourselves as a bridge to the future. But then also upskilling, working on trying to put together pre-apprenticeship programs with our labor partners in the area and major employers around fiber splicing and, you know, that kind of pre-apprenticeship workforce to bring down the cost of developing, you know, broadband expansion. Lots of work to be done. Unfortunately, it's all off the side of our desk, you know, a couple hours here and there. Don't have the staff, don't have the funding. But we are kind of scrapping it together and making it happen. But it just needs more resources.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that work and that update. That's important to learn. And as I tried to emphasize for folks who make decisions about staffing, that is an important piece of it. It's not going to happen if you're just doing a little bit here and a little bit there and trying to persuade your friends to come on board. But we can really accelerate so much faster if we have some dedicated staffing for it. Any final comments from my fellow panelists?
Final comments, that sounds important. I just think that these examples of is this better?
Yes.
Okay. I think that the examples that we've shared about how our systems can work together are pretty powerful. I think that the sum of our parts is greater than the sum of our parts, right? When we work together, and I am really proud to be part of this because I think as we each move forward to advance digital equity on our campuses, that aggregates up and just makes California so much better.
Ditto what she said. No, I appreciate you all for being here. Super glad to see my colleagues in the California community colleges represented here. It is really important for folks to be thinking about which layer or layers you plug into depending on the role that you play. So I appreciate the first comment that sort of surfaced. But there are multiple layers that can help us do this work. And so I'm super excited to hear from folks who have ideas because, you know, there are a lot of terrible things that have happened in the last couple of years. But the idea that we can turn some of that into work that catalyzes us for the future, I mean, I'm all on board.
Well said. Thank you all for coming to the panel. We really appreciate it. Join me in thanking our fellow panelists.